And we're live. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for Search Engine Journal Webinar Thursday. I am here with Craig Smith, Chief Strategy Officer at OuterBox. And if you don't know me, I am Heather Campbell. I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing here at SEJ. Craig, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Same. And so what are we here to talk about today? We are going to talk, Craig's going to give you some very actionable ways that you can protect the search visibility that you already have and help you scale it to get a little bit more maybe. So I'm going to go through some quick housekeeping and then I'm going to turn it over to Craig to go through the good stuff that you're here for. So first, use the chat. Let us know where you're coming in from. I'm based in West Virginia. Craig, where are you based in?
I'm based in the suburbs of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Nice. We're not that far from each other, honestly. Awesome. So also, one of the most important and asked questions that we get is you all will receive the presentation and the recording later in your inbox. So keep an eye for that. If you need closed captioning, it's the CC in the top right of your screen. Just give that a little click. We don't have any polls today, but we are going to do Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you have questions for Craig based on the content we're going over today, use the Q&A tab, put your questions in there. If you see a question that you like, you can give it a little thumbs up. And that upvote lets us know that those are important to you. So we try our best to front load those. You'll see some emojis down at the bottom. So if Craig says something you like, you agree with, give it a little heart, a little what is it, high five, And before you leave today's call, if you can stick around for about 30 seconds extra, take our post-webinar survey. It lets us know how today's webinar went, and it gives you the opportunity to make suggestions for future topics that you'd like to see. We will have a handout that Craig will talk about later, and I think that's it. That's all I got. So, Craig, with that, they're all yours. I'm out of here.
All right.
See you guys.
Thanks so much, Heather.
Back at the Q&A.
Thanks so much. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Thank you for joining today. My name is Craig Smith. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer of OuterBox. We're a digital agency that works with brands in both the B2B and B2C category to help them scale their organization, get new sales, drive more leads, etc. And I'm super excited about today's topic, 5 essential tactics to be seen and trusted in the new SERPs. And you coming back to artificial intelligence and SEO and what you can do, precise tactics and strategies you can embrace within your organization to drive visibility improvement. So just about me, real quick, I've been in the sector for about 25 years. I started at eBay Enterprise as a strategist. I started an agency that really was focused on e-commerce optimization and exited the private equity. And we were rolled up into OuterBox, where I'm at today. I'm a frequent guest lecturer on digital and e-commerce optimization. I frequently talk at Harvard, NYU, and Villanova University, where I'm based in Philadelphia. I'm a proud dad to 5 kids. They keep me on my toes, and I'm a diehard Philadelphia Eagles fan. Go Birds. Okay, so let's get to the good stuff. What are we going to talk about today? The first piece is going to be where we stand today. What is the state of the union? What are we seeing in the marketplace? And frankly, probably what you're seeing. We're going to then move to this whole dynamic of shifting search results and how we combat that. How do we move forward after what the market is calling the great decoupling? We'll then talk about 5 tactics. What are the 5 themes and execution areas that you can embrace to drive increased mentions and citations within large language models to better prepare your business for this shift that we're all seeing right now in terms of lost Google visibility and increased sessions from ChatGPT and more mind share within your audiences you're trying to target. We'll then talk about what's next, give a little bit of a future feel to what's coming down the road, and then wrap up with some final thoughts. Now, going back to where we stand today, really it's, as you know, everyone knows this in our industry, it's not just about rankings anymore. It's about earning your place when questions are answered at ChatGPT, at Perplexity, at Claude, etc. A key point that I want to make, though, and it's on the right, is that this is a market that's in its infancy. It's changing every day. It's consistently evolving, and there's no definitive formula. So anyone that tells you they know exactly how to maximize LLM traffic, well, frankly, they're probably not telling the truth. It's always changing, and we're doing a lot of testing and a lot of different approaches at OuterBox to see what's the best tactics and what's the best strategies for this market. And that's a lot what we're going to be talking about today. But really, from an executive level, the three things I would say to take away from today, and one is focus on clarity, structure, and credibility. Those three pieces, those are what we want to incorporate into your content. And we're going to show you how to do that so that you can structure your web pages in a way that you're delivering the proper signals that LLMs are utilizing to decide what content to surface. And then really, it's not that search journeys are going away. It's just that the share of them are. And a great graph that SimilarWeb, shared in their blog was looking at the growth pattern of ChatGPT and their visits, and the growth pattern of Google visits, and when is there going to be that inflection point where ChatGPT potentially overtakes Google? They're saying October 30th at the latest, which is very interesting. Could be sooner, could be after that, but really the focus here is to position your business in a way that's going to prepare you for this change, give you a leg up on your competition, and ensure that you're delivering the right messages to your audiences at their time of information seeking. It's all about what you're seeing here. It's, in Google, this is obviously coming from a typical search result for the term SEO pricing. You can see in this instance, we're getting the citation on the right, or the link on the right. We're getting the citation and the answer, our content in the box. And in conjunction with that, you want to get the placements in the large language models themselves, like ChatGPT. Here you are, you can see us being ranked for top overall SEO agencies, best for e-commerce SEO. What we're going to be talking about today is to increase your chances of getting your brand mentioned in these locations. And I'm probably stating what you already know, but this is more for the beginners out there who might have come to this webinar. This is what we're really looking to impact: the inclusion of your business, of your answers, of your brand in both search results, AI, as well as pure LLM surfacing. Okay, so what's changed? So, when you look at traditional SEO, we focused on URLs, we focused on pages. We said, hey, how do we create a page to better map to a keyword theme? Well, it's kind of changing. It's not about pages anymore. It's about paragraphs. Large language models are evaluating paragraphs, and they're doing entity-based comprehension. They're looking for clear, concise answers to questions that users really have. And later, I'm going to talk about a case study, which is really interesting and exciting, on how a very prominent brand utilized this approach to drive visibility. In the past, we optimized for metadata. What's the title tag? What's the meta description? How do we impact click-through rate? And we looked at backlinks. Well, now that, in my opinion, that becomes less important. Now, do title tags still matter in the overall grand scheme of things? Of course, and we still optimize them, but we're looking beyond that into the structure of content, the credibility of content, the mentions and social amplification signals that large language models see. That's what we're also looking at in conjunction with traditional SEO facets and KPIs. There's a three-part optimization framework that we're going to be talking about. I think all the tactics that we're going to be talking today fall into these themes. The first theme is helping large language models understand your position and your expertise. Never before, in my opinion, has brand content been so important. Content about your history, content about your customers, content about your audience and their problems, and how you solve those problems, and then giving the mechanisms for your audience to then publish user-generated content to give and enhance your website in a way that ChatGPT, Gemini, and other large language models are going to see you guys as the primary answer to a question, as a leader in a market. Really, really important. And there's ways that we're going to talk about to help them and help you in doing so. The next piece is really going under the hood of the car and extending your answers to your core audiences. You want to reformulate your content so that you're being very precise in the answers you're giving, so that these specific nuances that correlate to your product or service are being intently answered by your brand. And then lastly, we'll talk about the technical foundation. It's all these things, extending answers and your position is very, very important, but it doesn't matter if you don't have the right technical foundation. We're going to go through some of the key things to consider and to fix within your environment and your tech stack so that you can gain better leverage and get value from your efforts. All right, well, let's get started into the shifts in search. So what are we seeing? And again, this is probably not new news to you, but I think it's worth revisiting. The key thing here is that position one ain't what it used to be. Let's say a year ago, if I had ranked number one for the term crib betting, maybe I was getting 10,000 sessions a month. Well, now that has been significantly shaved. Studies are showing a 34% decrease in the position one click-through rate when AI overviews are present. So, Google's stating that we're getting more clicks because of the nature of people and how they're asking questions one after another. But a lot of those questions are being surfaced with zero-click answers where people are not clicking through. So that's leading to this lack of click-through rate within the number one spot. So it's making the positioning in the AI overview much more important to achieve. And then this is an interesting graph, or excuse me, from Search Console. This is internal Search Console data from Ahrefs, one of the leading providers of SEO data in the marketplace. And they shared this on their blog. And you can see earlier this year, that inflection point of when AI overviews really got more prominence, their impressions are going up, but their clicks are going down. This is that crocodile mouth that people have been stating. And it's again, this has been earlier this year where this theme really took place. But again, I wanted to make sure for some folks who might be new on the call, this is where people are encountering challenges. And this is one of the main problems that when I speak to brands, like, hey, we're down year over year, what do we do? Well, there's a lot of avenues to take and strategies to deploy. And again, that's what we're going to be talking about today. The AI overviews have grown significantly as the year went on. After the March core update, AI overviews doubled. And with that, you can see in March 16th, approximately, that 116% growth in just a month and a half worth of time. So it's clearly an area that Google's looking at to keep their moat of informational gathering by the public web to deliver more AI answers. Interestingly enough, when I was reading the transcript from their search leader in Wall Street Journal yesterday, I think it was yesterday, and they started mentioning that they're probably going to be incorporating links into the answers, and that's a really good sign. So that right now, a lot of times in those answers, you don't have an evident link. I think that's going to become a bigger piece of the equation, which hopefully will drive more click-throughs into your web properties. Now, a key aspect that we uncovered in our research was the increase of queries that are complex in nature. A study from BrightEdge showed a massive increase in queries that are 8+ words. Folks are behaving in a manner where they're not asking 3 to 5 word queries. They're asking 8 words and beyond that. I mean, I just know from my own behavior, I use AI all through the day. My favorite large language model is Claude Opus. And I'm frequently asking questions just to do better my job, to learn more about whatever it is that I'm dealing with in that day. And because of that, it's important that you're referencing your content in a way that's structured to meet this demand. And the quote in the bottom left is very interesting. This came from an executive at BrightEdge saying, SEO is no longer about ranking. It's about being recommended and cited. The new rules of search are not about abandoning what worked, but evolving it. And also interesting was that 400% increase in citations from search results in positions 21 through 30. So if you're ranking 25, which would be page 3 for a given keyword, well, there still is a chance that you might be referenced in a Google Gemini citation or in a ChatGPT citation or answer. But what we found is that basic fundamental SEO tactics do have a compound effect. When you're creating better content, when you have better internal linking, when you have a quality link profile, all those things do help generative engine optimization, what we're talking about today, but there's a lot of other ancillary things that you want to embrace as well. Okay, let's talk about the 5 tactics, some of the key levers to pull, some of the ways that you can quickly, go about and try to improve your digital presence in large language models. Here they are, in summary form. The first thing we're going to talk about is building topical authority and trust. This is all about boosting credibility, boosting the consistency of your mentions through really trying to develop your expertise. And there's ways to do that both on your site and off your site. We'll talk about architecting content around real questions. This is one of the most effective tactics I think we're going to be talking about here. It's going through your category and product pages, service pages, and making sure that you're addressing genuine user queries, what folks are truly asking about. Then we're going to talk about structured data. If you're not familiar with structured data, it's a way to structure content on a web page that really helps large language models and helps search engines in understanding the nature of what it's about. We're going to talk about that and show some examples. We're going to talk about freshness and inclusion tools, things like index now, things like LLMs TXT files that are going to help LLMs understand your content footprint and make sure that you're getting indexed and getting surfaced rapidly. We don't want to be waiting a month or two for it to be discovered. And then we'll lastly talk about how to maximize your footprint through technical hygiene. What are some of the key things to check off the list to make sure that you have a clean bill of health from a technical perspective? One thing we'll talk about is JavaScript, for example. Large language models cannot execute JavaScript the same way that search engines can. Because of that, what we frequently see is companies really having pockets of content throughout their site, throughout their navigation, that never really get picked up by a large language model due to JavaScript. Okay, let's jump into the first one. So tactic 1, building topical authority and trust. Really, really important. You want to be seen by a large language model as the leader, as the number one choice. The first thing to do is to build a content hub. Now, what is a content hub? This is thinking beyond a blog. This is thinking about how do we create essentially a publishing hub that gives diverse content to our audience that speaks to what they're passionate about and what their problems are and what they're looking to achieve. This is a great example from a previous client called Bulk Reef Supply. Bulk Reef Supply is a private e-commerce store that specializes in products for the reef community. Think about having a saltwater fish tank at home. That's really who they cater to, a very precise niche. You can see within their hub, their content hub on their site, they have video, the series here. They have calculators to help answer key questions. They have guides and how-tos to educate their audience at different stages of their journey. Are they new? Do they have a tank, but they want to take it to the next level? Do they want to go from freshwater to saltwater? A variety of guides and how-tos that go back to the questions that they're looking to answer. And they also have charts and diagrams and a really good internal linking structure. This is, in my opinion, the holy grail. Like, they're really doing a great job of leveraging content diversity to make sure they are delivering on that depth, clarity, and consistency, as I mentioned above, but in a variety of different ways. The next thing to do after that content hub is create signals, right? You want to be present where large language models are getting a depth of the conversation. The number one source referenced on ChatGPT is Reddit and YouTube. They're very close. There's variance in that, but Reddit is very, very important. What we've seen is brands that can go to places like Reddit, like Quora, and answer questions through quality content are seeing positive impacts in large language models. Now, the key here is providing value. You're not going here trying to promote Bulk Reef Supply for this conversation about protein skimmers. If someone asks a question about protein skimmers, this would be a great place to say, hey, here, we wrote a guide all about the nuances of protein skimmers. I think it'll help you with XYZ problem, and drop the link. This will give you obviously a much greater chance to be allowed by the moderator, but this is a key external signal. Now, a large language model is going to see your content reference in a specific question and help present you as a solution for the problem. That's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to provide value and to real questions and be of use to the audience. And you really want to make sure that your content aligns with expectations. And I got this from Google's documentation. I thought it was pretty interesting. In reading it, Google's saying users are asking longer and more specific questions as well as follow-up questions. So there's really no level of depth you can't go down. I mean, chances are, if you can think of a question to ask to your product, you have someone in your audience, someone in your prospect pool that's asking the same thing, and you want to tailor your content strategy to address these nuanced queries. All right, let's move on. User-generated content, very, very important. And again, in that Wall Street Journal podcast that I referenced earlier, the leader of their search product mentioned user-generated content and how Google Gemini is picking it up more often, but it's definitely a great way to get a stream of fresh and intent-rich data for large language models to chew on. So in this example, again, I'm keeping the same theme of the bulk reef supply. We've gone to Reddit and there's protein skimmers. Now I'm on that product page. Well, here you want to give mechanisms for your audience to be able to answer questions, because now when this question, will it fit a Red Sea 26-gallon peninsula? It's already been answered by your brand. It's already likely been crawled by ChatGPT. You're giving a great bridge to answer the question. And we're going to talk about later, especially in e-commerce, there's some nuances how you can structure a data feed and publish it directly into ChatGPT. Going to be a very powerful way for anyone who's selling physical products and has a physical data feed where they can use this new protocol to get enhanced, opportunity. Okay, and you also want to join the conversation in trusted channels. Forums are a great place to do this. So we have Quora, we have Reddit. These are the giants, but there's, in this case, again, going back to the protein skimmer example in the Reef Company, there are going to be these niche communities and forums where you can also add value. That's the key words here, add value with content. In this example, here's, hey all, what's your opinions on a protein skimmer for a small tank? I'm thinking for the 15 to 30 gallon range. This is a great use case of, again, seeding your content, influencing sentiment by being part of the conversation, not being sales in any way, but being educational in nature to position your brand as a potential solution. Okay, so that's signals. That's creating signals for large language models about your brand. Now we want to architect the content around real questions. What you need to do is follow a structured question mapping approach. In this example, I took the term UGG boots and I ran it through a tool that we leverage for this type of information. And you can see just the term UGG boots had 100 questions that are being asked by users in Google results. And then you have all of the prepositions for this word. Then you have all of the comparison phrases for this word. You also have Google at the bottom of the search term, what they serve in terms of alternative searches people also asked. So there is a plethora of intelligence you can get. And the key is going through this list strategically and saying, does this make sense for our audience? If the answer is yes, if someone's going to have that question, you can only do good for your business by answering it in a well-structured content block with the appropriate schema markup, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. This is what we want to do, create a scalable question and answer architecture to ensure that you become the answer and that you're not just relying on your general content on your product page to answer these types of questions. We do this a lot with internal tools. Like, for example, form tracking is a great place where you'll get questions that you need to answer on your products. You can see in this example in a B2B business, we're getting the question, what is the difference between double and single-sided? Maybe this wasn't referenced on the page. A great thing to include on your page so that you're going to surface. Another process that we follow is call tracking. Using technology, using AI to listen to calls and engineer for us what are the questions that are being asked and do they exist on our web pages? And if they don't, again, creating a very robust answer with proper markup on a page that's fast, and then using some of the other approaches like index now, which we'll talk about. You want to stay fresh and timely with a consistent publishing cadence. This is not something that's set it and forget it. It's something that I think needs to be done on a monthly basis. Look at your landscape of pages, your information architecture, your category structure, and define a calendar on how you're going to deploy this new content into your ecosystem, because freshness and relevance are really what they're looking for. And this is an example from Land's End, one of our customers, that we're publishing frequently asked questions here about swimsuits. Well, for them, they have hundreds of categories, so it's kind of pick and choose which ones make the most sense based upon what's ranking. But every page on your site is an opportunity to reflect new search behavior, incorporate incremental content, and keep a rhythm. Keep doing it on a cadence so that your site's in sync with algorithms. Okay. Now, moving into structured data. This is a really important topic. Structured data, otherwise known as microformatting, is again a way that you can make your web content better absorbed and understood by search engines. A long time ago, probably about 15 years ago, schema.org came around. Schema.org was a consortium between Google, Bing, or at the time, just Microsoft Search and Yahoo and Yandex and some other international engines. And they said, hey, let's all get together and figure out a way where we can have a protocol for webmasters to construct their content in a way that's best suited for us to understand it. And it's just helping them do their job. It's making it easier for a search engine or a large language model to understand the theme of a page through specific schema. One that is important for large language models, in my opinion, is FAQ schema. You can see it right here. All these nuances are essentially populated into a snippet of code that gets published in the page. And this allows, again, you to have more control on the content you're publishing and for your large language models to understand it. I think this is a great example and case study of how schema can be incredibly effective. Webflow, which is a content management system, I think is phenomenal. I use it. It drove a 24% impression growth and 331 new AI citations by incorporating updated FAQ content in conjunction with schema markup to 6 of their core feature pages. Now, the methodology they executed was very interesting. They used Perplexity, one of the large language models, to do deep research on the Google's people also ask results. They used Reddit and subreddits and forums to also uncover what questions are users actually asking in the web platform industry and about their specific product. They have all this FAQ content, they identify gaps, they have their final list of questions that they got from the deep research. They created new on-brand content and specific answers for each specific one, and it was all structured in clean markup and republished. You can see their flow on the right there. This all was in a LinkedIn post from their head of growth, but just was a clear case study on, they looked at their marketplace, they looked at their current penetration and content, they looked at their audience, and they reformulated what they were providing to the market based upon real life data, the high intent questions that people that were down the funnel were looking for. Now, they probably also got penetration in upper funnel results. I mean, 331 new citations for new questions is a lot of, I'm sure, different types of questions, but this is a great strategic framework I would recommend to consider within your business and what we're doing for clients. Okay, tactic number 4, controlling freshness and inclusion with AI-first tools. Let's start with merchant feed optimization. So if you're an e-commerce brand, without question, you need to be publishing a feed to Google Merchant Center, and maybe more importantly for large language models, aka ChatGPT, Microsoft. Now, if you go into the ChatGPT documentation, I think this is very, very interesting. They state how they select merchants for specific product queries, what they say here, and I'll read it. When a user clicks a product, we might show a list of merchants offering it. This list is generated based upon merchant and product metadata we receive from third-party providers. I wonder who that provider is, considering Microsoft has a big equity stake. And currently, the order in which we display merchants is predominantly determined by these providers. So here, ChatGPT is saying, we don't really have a ranking algo. We're using KPIs or metrics from their, as they state, third-party providers to rank. My gut tells me this is Microsoft and who they're referencing in their documentation. This, again, can be read in their terms of service or where I found this in their website. But I really would recommend to publish that feed to Microsoft, publish that feed to Google, make sure you're hitting all the fields, make sure you don't have any errors to ensure accurate, complete, and enhanced penetration. What's also really new and exciting within ChatGPT is what they're calling ACP, the Agentic Commerce Protocol. This is really new. This has only been out for like a month or so. Basically, it's now, when you get approved, you can publish a data feed directly into ChatGPT. It has the same concepts that you would have with Google Merchant Center. You have a feed, you map the feed to their parameters, you test it, you optimize the feed if possible, and this is going to give you a better placement within ChatGPT. So I think both are really important. Look at the ChatGPT ACP protocol in conjunction with the Microsoft Merchant Center and Google Merchant Center. And as I mentioned, like there's feed specifications. You can see ChatGPT is saying, hey, this is the process. You need to prepare your feed, format your catalog using our spec guide, deliver it to us with the primary delivery method, and then they're going to ingest it, validate it, and then utilize it for ranking. And then they're also saying keep it fresh. So just, again, the same thing that you would do in Microsoft, you now can do at ChatGPT following this Agentic Commerce Protocol. It's called ACP. You also, I would recommend, use Index Now. Index Now is a web protocol that's only used by Microsoft and Yandex. Google says, hey, we're testing it. Really what Index Now is, it's making sure your updates are immediately reflected in crawls. It's like a ping that goes out and tells engines, predominantly, again, Microsoft and Yandex, hey, there's new content that's been published. So anywhere where there's fast changing content, publishers, for example, or let's think an e-commerce flash sale, it's important that you're using Index Now so that you can get crawled and indexed as fast as possible, because sometimes there's a delay, there's a gap. You might publish something and even submit it, and it might not get crawled by Microsoft for weeks, maybe months. And this is a great way and a protocol to ensure that doesn't happen. And then lastly, LLMs.txt files. This is an interesting topic and one that has a lot of debate in the industry. Large language or LLMs.txt files basically is a lightweight way to signal to large language models your content footprint and what's most important. It's about curating and formatting your resources in markdown language. So everything is just mapped out, and a large language model doesn't have to crawl your site. They get the gist right from this file. Now, I've been hearing from SEO folks who are like, oh, this is a waste of time. It doesn't move the needle. I disagree with that. I have seen it move the needle. It moved the needle with our site. But what I always like to point at is two of the leading AI providers, Perplexity and Anthropic, are both using LLMs.txt files on their site. You can see right here, there is the Perplexity file. They have this on their website. They are taking the same approach that I'm recommending here to deploy this file to help with indexation, and Anthropic is doing the same thing. You can see the URL, docs.claude.com. So it's definitely worth a test. It's something that you would put on your root of your website. So yoursite.com/LLMs.txt, and it's just a pure text file that gives an overview footprint of your website. It's not about granting or denying access. There is absolutely no correlation with this and a robots.txt file, which is like the red light, green light on your directory structure in your site. This is all about making it easy for them, a large language model, to understand the themes on your site in a single file. So again, worth a test. Is it going to be crazy growth to your site from this? I don't know, but I would say it's worth a test and you should get some improvements. All right, tactic 5. We've talked about, signals. We've talked about answering questions. We talked about semantic markup and freshness. Well, let's talk about technical hygiene. The first thing I want you to take away here is that you want to limit JavaScript. Large language models, unlike search engines, cannot execute JavaScript. So what that means is content that would be ingested or inserted from JavaScript, which means like, hey, they got to pull it from another server and inject it in your page. For example, reviews, right? If you have customer reviews that are being ingested via JavaScript, they're likely not going to be crawled by a large language model. So look to incorporate solutions and methods that gets the content in your HTML inline. You want to prevent this key information to be seen by prioritizing server rendered content and minimize JS dependencies when possible. A great way to check, and if you're curious, hey, is my site really reliant on JavaScript? There's plugins that you can use in Google Chrome that allow you to flip on and off. You can go to your product page, turn your JavaScript off, and see what do you lose. Do you lose a little bit? Do you lose a lot? If you're losing a lot, it might be worth taking a look at that template structure and talking to your dev folks, talking to us and saying, what could we do to reformulate our product page in a way that we don't lose this really, really important content that's being deployed via JavaScript. Now, other technical things to consider. First, your content structure. The semantic HTML5, are you using that? Your hierarchy, do you have the proper heading flow, H1, H2, H3s? You don't want to repeat H1s on a page. You don't want to not have this flow throughout your site like chapters in a book. Are you doing things with lists and tables? Large language models love lists and tables. It helps them better understand content, as well as short paragraphs, keeping those self-contained ideas. Looking at other things like canonical URLs and metadata and schema. This is this second column right here. Very important. We talked a lot about schema.org. We didn't talk much about open graph tags, but you want to have them. Bot accessibility. Now, bot accessibility, this is just pure SEO. I mean, I talked earlier how the lines of SEO and large language model optimization, they blur. And things that you do in SEO many times can have a positive impact in large language models. Robots.txt being one, an XML sitemap being another. Fast load times without question. You want to really focus on your load time. Look at your images. How long are they taking? Do you have progressive formats? Look at your site and how you render JavaScript and how you render CSS. Are you using lazy loading? What can you do to pre-render content to make it faster? All of these things are going to help bot accessibility and going to help your site. Other things to consider: attribution signals. Things like copyright notices and markup and author pages. Author pages are really important. It's going to help you develop more credibility. We talked earlier about how trust is a key piece of this equation. Author pages help deliver a greater degree of trust. Machine readable formats, just some other nuances there, and URL stability, making sure that you have the proper structure, avoid parameter changes, use 301 redirects sparingly, and making sure you have proper last modified headers and change logs. Okay, measurement. What's next, and some final thoughts as we wrap up prior to Q&A. I want to make sure we give a lot of time for Q&A. What does success look like? Again, it's not just clicks anymore. It's having a presence. It's being included. It's being referenced and cited as the answer. And this will get you enhanced visibility and referral traffic, probably from people who then click through in a link there, or maybe search your brand in an ancillary search. You want to create that brand trust through semantic visibility and authority signals, things that we talked about earlier, and ultimately get surfaced for more questions when people are asking questions at ChatGPT. How do we measure this today? Well, there's a couple ways. First, you look for UTM parameters from direct sources, and this is really with Google Analytics. Where's your referral traffic coming from? Is it coming from ChatGPT? Is it coming from Perplexity? You also want to flag Google results where AI overviews are detected, and I'll show you an example of that. And you also might want to consider using a third-party data tool for attribution. We have our solution, Loop Analytics, in conjunction with CallRail, to really kind of help understand how this traffic converts on the back end. This is an example of measurements on keyword counts with AI overviews. This is a great KPI to look at. How many phrases and how many keywords are we ranking for with an AI overview showing with our brand? Really probably a North Star. And this is an example of our penetration throughout the year moving northward. I mentioned earlier Google Analytics. This is just a snapshot of that. And then here is our internal tool, our analytical tool internally that we use for some of our B2B customers called Loop. Here, we're searching filters for ChatGPT, and we can see the penetration and growth for a customer. All right, some final thoughts before we open up to Q&A. As I mentioned earlier, this market isn't mature. Nobody knows exactly, and nobody actually knows exactly how to optimize SEO either. It was always something of a black box for these last 20 years I've been doing it. But this is a big sea shift. This is the biggest change, in my opinion, since the proliferation of mobile devices in commerce and in digital marketing. But it's not mature yet, but it's coming fast. And these are some of the things to take away. Number one, it's imperative that you start to get to work on this. You just can't stand pat. Whether you sell to businesses or consumers, you must earn your place. And you do that through, again, great content, building trust, answering questions, and the proper tech foundation. You want to now make sure that you structure your trustworthy content in a way that clearly communicates your expertise. Look at your content. Put yourself in the user's shoes. Is it good? Is it the best that's being referenced in a ChatGPT result? And if not, you need to level up the content that's targeting this specific keyword or theme. That's what's going to make you grow. And engagement beyond your site matters. I mentioned earlier, forums, product reviews, public conversations, anywhere there's a topic and you can influence the conversation through education. Influence the conversation through education and content. That's really, really important. Focus on these ecosystems. Make it part of your cadence in your marketing team to ensure that you are pushing that engagement. The technical foundation, a must-have. Structured data, right? Schema.org, FAQ schema, all these schemas that are going to help engines and help large language models understand your site. That's a must. You need the data feeds. Make sure you're publishing. If you're in a commerce brand, if you're publishing to Microsoft, now also try the agentic commerce protocol at ChatGPT to publish your feed directly into them. It's going to be, I think, very impactful for your business. Use Index Now, use LLMs TXT file or test it. Give your content the best shot at being surfaced. And then lastly, stay nimble. There's going to be new tools and new approaches by the day. I mean, it's always changing. Make sure you have an ear on the marketplace and make sure that you have, an organizational mindset. Like, look, this is not set it and forget it. As I mentioned earlier, it's being agile and trying to create a new way of doing things in your organization or with us at OuterBox to make sure you're getting referenced in ChatGPT and beyond. Okay, now if you're ready to elevate your AI visibility, if you'd like to, go a little further and identify opportunities within your website, we're providing 25 exclusive audits for qualified brands. And you can do that through the pop-up that just showed on your screen. And this is a great way for you to get some really free insights that are all about a benchmark on how your brand appears. And then we'll include 3 strategies to improve your presence in AI search results, as well as get access to the optimization framework that we use internally to execute these programs with our customers. Also, we did provide for all attendees the ability to download our AI checklist. I think it's on the right of your presentation that you're looking at right now. If maybe the moderator, Heather, could drop that in the chat, perhaps. It's a way to access some great content on, again, quick wins. Get a lot of what we talked about today in a summary checklist form. It's a great deliverable that you can share with your executive team, with your marketing team, to make sure you're all rowing the same direction and trying to impact this. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me, search Craig Smith, OuterBox. You can connect. I'm happy to talk and meet with you in person about your organization and the opportunities that you have within AI. So definitely scan that, and you can get one of these exclusive audits. I think you'll be very happy with the output you get. Okay, so with that, I am going to give it back to the folks at Search Engine Journal. Hope you got some value from this presentation today. Let's open up to Q&A and get at it.
That was some great stuff, Craig. Thank you so much. I scanned the QR code. I'm waiting for it to come into my computer so I can drop that in there. But it did work for me. So if you give that QR code a scan, but we'll get that in the chat for you all in case you missed it. It'll also be in the presentation that we send later. So watch your inbox for that. We'll have the presentation and the recording. All right. With that, we have a lot of questions. So let's get started. All right. First question from Connor. How do brands answer questions on Reddit? Great question, because it's not just as easy as going in there with your brand, right? But do they create a company profile, or do experts in the company comment on theirs? What do you recommend, Craig?
Yeah, I've seen the latter. I mean, one thing about Reddit is it's a lot of anonymous names, right? The names that they deliver, you have to configure your name upon account creation. I've seen folks like create like organizational individual accounts and then answer questions in that manner. Now, you could take the approach if you wanted to be purely anonymous and just say, hey, this content helped me. It's the same thing. The goal is going to be achieved by having it, A, be moderated and allowed to be published, and B, for it to be digested and discovered by a large language model for inclusion. So I don't think it really matters. I mean, I think if you're doing it the first way, it now opens you up to a little bit more scrutiny, where you could have it turn into a customer service channel, customer service interactions. I think it'd be interesting to test both of these, but I'm seeing more people do it on the latter.
Yeah, that's what we're seeing too. I just dropped that link to the QR code in the chat as well for you all for that audit. All right, let's see, what else do we have? So AR has a question. And AR, thank you for coming to our webinar. I know I've seen your name around here a couple of times. So any tools which can help us structure our website properly for the major LLMs? Any suggestions here?
Yeah, so when I think structure, I think architecture, which is the categorical breakdown of how you structure your web pages. So what is your category layer beneath your homepage? What is your subcategory layer beneath your categories? What is the family page layer beneath the subcategories, and what's the product page layer beneath that? Now, not all businesses need that level of depth, but there's a chance that you might. So the first thing is to create an information architecture document and fill in the gaps. Where do you not have a theme referenced to target a new market or a market you maybe already have? I'll give you an example. Like, we work with a client in the B2B lighting space, and in a conversation one day, he's like, hey, we just got a couple requests for high schools that want to light up their sports fields. Well, they didn't have a sports fields page, so let's create a new family page for sports field lighting, and then under that is their products. So that's the work of creating the architecture based upon keyword research, based upon understanding what your audience needs. Now, a technical thing you can do is that LLMs.txt file. And there actually is free tools to help you create that. If you have a shallow site, let's say 200 pages, you can create this LLMs.txt file in 10 minutes. Just go to Google, search LLMs.txt file creator. There's some out there. I've used a bunch of them. Throw in your URL, and then it will create the file for you. Then has to be uploaded into the root of your site with the proper file name. And then you should see some of that magic happen.
Excellent. All right, AR, there you go. So Mark is asking, in the age of zero-click search, what KPIs should a SEO, AEO, GEO teams be tracking to demonstrate ROI and visibility?
Yeah, so I would go back to that section regarding tracking. I think one is how many phrases, keyword searches are, and this is predominantly Google, that are we being referenced on with AI overviews? Are we showing as cited in the answer or on the right sidebar? In ChatGPT, it's much more difficult. And truly, I haven't seen a solution that is top notch and being able to give you data on how many times you're mentioned in ChatGPT. A lot of the tools that we use is, AccuRanker is our keyword tool that we have a partnership with. They tell us when we're surfacing, when we're being mentioned, but a lot of it's manual. It's going and taking a lot of these questions that are prominent within your market and just doing kind of manual searching. But the KPIs would be, when do you surface, traffic, session count from the LLMs themselves, and ultimately conversions. We have found that this traffic segment has significantly high intent, converts at a higher degree, is a higher quality because they're further down the shopping funnel, and also probably have a more sophisticated user. So I would look at the traffic, the conversions, and the penetration of your brand as it relates to AI overviews, and are you being cited?
Excellent. Maria is asking, I know you talked about user-generated content throughout the deck a couple times. Maria is asking, how can UGC be beneficial for B2B companies?
Yeah, that's a great question. So user-generated content is traditionally in B2C. So, Maria's right there. If you're a B2C e-commerce company, the inclusion of a module to enable product reviews is based upon, is it something that really is for example, if I'm buying an appliance part for a refrigerator, I'm not going to write a review on it. But there is less B2B there. With B2B, I think user-generated content would be more about going to communities and trying to make conversations happen and try to educate versus on your site itself, unless you sell products. And if you're a B2B company, a lead gen company in manufacturing, you're typically not going to have UGC. But what you could do is try to be proactive with creating more Google reviews or more Yelp reviews. There's ways and mechanisms, predominantly through email automation and direct outreach, for you to reach out to your customers and say, hey, will you leave us a Google review? If they would, it's going to help you in large language models. It's going to help you in Gemini.
There's a lot of good questions. So we're not going to be able to get to them all. I'm just letting everybody know right now. We're going to do our best to get to them in the next 10 minutes though. So Ryan asks, how should brands balance AI-driven SEO strategies with human creativity to avoid producing repetitive or homogenized content that could harm rankings?
Wow, that's an awesome question, and one I'm really passionate about. I mean, it's called AI slop, right? We all know it. Google knows it, that AI slop is out there. What is going to win is the human touch. It's the proprietary research. It's the personal experience. It's the person who's writing a blog post at home and showing videos of how they fix a computer. That's going to rank over a AI generated fix your computer post every single time. Again, and that I know I mentioned a couple times, but that the VP of search at Google talked this morning, or I read this morning, about short form video. Short form video is another type of content that's being embraced by Gemini and by LLMs, something that should be in your strategy. So I think the more you can create emotion, the more you create a personal touch to your core audience and the ICPs in your audience, the better you're going to be presented. Now, I'm not going to say that AI content doesn't have a place. It just always has you need a human in the loop. There needs to be an editing process. There needs to be a revamp process where you add data and stats and links and pictures and videos into any AI content. But where AI really works, I think, from a content production perspective, is helping create the briefs. Go to Claude Opus, say, create me a brief for a buyer's guide about camcorders, and it's going to give you a good framework of reference to say, hey, here are the things you should be talking about, and maybe fill in some gaps that you didn't consider. But the writing, at the end of the day, is always going to be better if a human being did it with a little bit of flair, a little bit of creativity, with real life experience and examples. That's what's going to rank better in a large language model.
Yeah, that's great. And same thing, we're using it for some of our briefs. And you actually answered one of Kenyatta's question. She asked, did you say Core Opus, but you said Claude Opus.
Claude Opus,
so
yeah.
I just replied to you, Kenyatta. I hope you got that.
Yeah.
All right.
That is just Claude.ai is the large language model, and there's a certain model you can use called Opus. It's, in my opinion, the best one they have.
All right, so let's go back to some of the early part of the presentation. Jenna's asking, how should the charts and diagrams be tagged to get recognized by LLMs?
So if you have an image, an image would not be tagged with an FAQ schema. It wouldn't be tagged with a how-to schema. It really would just be referenced in a product schema. So it doesn't want to be tagged per se. It's a great question. Again, I don't know everything about this topic. It's always changing. But what I would say here is, really make sure that you have proper alt tag definition, as that will be leveraged as a way that Google will help understand. But charts and diagrams, I don't think you would leverage any of the schema things we mentioned. I think if you have it included in your raw HTML, prominent up in the code base, it should be discovered and should be surfaced.
Bruno is asking, Craig, do you see some Google Search Console for LLMs coming up?
Yeah, I think you will get more and more Google Search Console details in their interface moving forward. Really, the big inflection point that everyone in the industry is wondering about, and what we consistently look for clues on, is when does AI mode become the status quo? Will Google ever make the change where you don't have a single box You have a similar to ChatGPT kind of experience where it's the ongoing thread. Will that ever be the de facto standard? There's been some tweets that I've seen from product managers at Google kind of hinting at this. If that happens, I don't know what the KPIs are going to look like, but that is, I think, the big sea change that could come the next year or two that really is going to shake up the industry, similar to what the inclusion of AI overviews did this year.
Yeah, and you just covered that one for Brandy. Let's see about this one. A little long, but can you share more about your results with using LLMs.txt? Like you said, it seems very controversial in the industry, and there's talk of OpenAI, Google, and XAI all testing frameworks for crawler directives. Any proof or truth to this?
Yeah, I mean, the proof I can say is we did deploy it on our site and did see positive gains. I see Anthropic use it. We see Perplexity use it. OpenAI does. I have not seen any evidence that they're using it. But that being said, our ChatGPT traffic did go up after we deployed the file. So it's low risk. There's no negative impact that you can. It's not like if you deploy this file, Google's going to penalize you in any way. You're not going to lose any search rankings. I think if you're a company with less than 200 pages, it's a no-brainer. If you're a company, an e-commerce brand with 50,000 products, then I might only do my category layer, right? Just try the category layer and see, okay, here's all our category page. And we deploy all the category pages in an LMS.txt file. We launch it, look back 30 days later, look at that directory and traffic, or that directory path, and look at, did more traffic come from ChatGPT? Did more traffic come from Anthropic? And that'll answer that question. So is there any proof of truth? I mean, it worked for us. I think it's interesting that they're using it, but it's something that I think every brand has to test and learn on their own.
You said the magic word. As I was listening to you talk, you said test. That's it. Put your marketer hat on and test it. See what it does for you, and then tweak it and play with it a little bit, right?
Yep.
So Hernan is asking, I want to add FAQ schema in some pages, but they don't have FAQ section. Is it necessary that my page has an FAQ section in order to add FAQ schema?
So no, you don't necessarily have to have an FAQ section per se that's outlined. I think if, I've seen people use it like on a product page, you just have a question about the product with the right markup language. So the key here is you don't need any type of div module or section of the page. It's all about FAQs. You just need the answer and the question tagged appropriately with the appropriate markup, and it should achieve the result.
Awesome. I think we got time for maybe one, maybe two more, if I can grab another one. So Andrew asks, as for the LLM.txt file, how do you define cornerstone content that should be included?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would do is look at the top 50 pages on traffic that come through your site. Like your top 50 pages in terms of traffic that's coming to your site, those are the pages that right now search engines see as valuable, that your audience is searching for, leading towards the prominence in your data. So those are the ones I would consider. Other things I would consider is look at the pieces you've published. What is the best ones? And then other strategies like prune, and I've seen a lot of SEO, approaches that embrace this. Prune what doesn't work. Prune what's not getting traffic. You want to kind of cut off the dead wood per se. That also can be very effective to drive better results. But with this, I would say your top 50 pages, and then anything else that you think really, and usually it's category pages. And if you have 10 products, sure, incorporate them as well. But if you're a large e-commerce business, I would probably just start with the categories.
All right. I think that's about all we have time for, Craig. Thank you for putting, for the presentation, for all of the insights that you shared with our audience. Like I told everybody, you're going to get the recording and the slides later. We'll make sure that link is also in your follow-up email. Make sure you grab the handout. It is a checklist. It's an AI optimization checklist. So everybody should make sure you download that before you leave today. Stick around for the survey. But Craig, before I let you go, again, big thanks to you and OuterBox. Any last words, and tell the people where to find you before you go?
Yeah. Last words would be, this is ever changing. You gotta be agile, test, learn, create signals, create great content, and you will see your results improve. I'd love to talk to you further. If you want to speak to me, you can go to outerbox.com, fill out one of those audit requests, and we definitely can dive into your site and take a deeper look under the hood on what should be done. So it's a pleasure being here, Heather. Thank you for having me, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We will see you on next week's SEJ webinar. Stay tuned for that survey and go on with your day, evening, afternoon. We'll see you later. Thanks for joining us. Bye, y'all.
Bye-bye.